How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and I can't believe I'm saying it, but we're here to talk about my 5 predictions for the Denver real estate and housing market in 2025. Whew, and we're starting right now. Alright, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everett, and listen, if you're interested in learning all about moving to Denver, moving to the Front Range, moving to Colorado, this is the channel for you. So make sure you click on that subscribe button. And listen, as much as I would love to say that I'm here for entertainment purposes, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team with some of the state's most talented realtors. And we love helping people move to this state. So the number and email you see on the screen, know that I am always the person. Answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. They're winning if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is my 5 predictions for the Denver housing market and real estate in 2025. Alright, so for those of you who may not have watched one of my videos before, I'm just going to throw out that I'm not much of a fluff person. I'm more of a let's get to the pain point, rip off the band-aid, and really get to what you need to know to keep yourself from getting in trouble. So having said that, in order for us to talk about the future, we need to talk about the past, and we need to accept the damage that was done to our housing market nationwide and certainly here in Denver from March, April of 2020 through June of 2022. At a period of time that a lot of people like to look back on and talk about how wonderful these low interest rates are, we also saw appreciation of homes in the double digits. In certain areas of Denver, in fact, in which we saw 20, 25, 30+% appreciation in a 24-month period. What we're talking about is an unsustainable and detrimental period of time that we're still in many ways recovering from. To put this in perspective, the average sales price of a home in the Denver metro area has increased by nearly 35% since October of 2020. That's from $521,000 to over $708,000 of your average price point here in Denver. Now, the good news, if you could say so, is that, however, since October of 2022, the average sales price of a home in the metro area has only increased 2.5%. This is largely due to mortgage interest rates increasing again from roughly that 3% zone to anywhere from 6.5% to up to 8% for the majority of time over the last 24 to 30 months. Even more interesting, if you look at the median home price in October of 2022 and the median price in October of 2024, they haven't changed. It's like a $90 difference between the two. So while home prices skyrocketed during the pandemic, these increased interest rates have actually leveled off that appreciation at a time when, as painful as higher rates have been, we needed it the most. Higher rates was actually the only thing that was going to slow down this housing market. It was a machine. Now, as of the making of this video, I don't have November data, but in October, you saw an increase in home sales of roughly 2.3, 2.4% from October of the previous year. That was a good sign. Normally, this is the time of year when things are starting to slow down. Now, there was a reason for it. We saw interest rates drop in July, August, getting into September of this year, and that typically, after a handful of weeks and people coming to their senses, if you will, they start to put in applications and start to buy homes. We have since seen somewhat of a decline, which again is perfectly natural for this time of year, but also led into our election that has since passed. Currently, with rates still fluctuating between 6.5% and 7%, you're seeing this market and that stagnation remain, and I would expect to see that certainly through the end of the year. We're talking mid-December at the moment, and going into the early parts of 2025. Now, easily the hugest factor in our housing market over the last, let's say, 5 to 6 years plus hasn't been demand, hasn't been supply, it has been interest rate. We went from quite possibly the cheapest money we will ever see for mortgage rates, when people could get rates in the 2s and 3s, of course they would pay a heck of a lot more for their house, to interest rates that neared 8%. One of the biggest challenges we have faced during this period of time is the dramatic, and I do use the term dramatic, fluctuation of interest rates, in which we have been in the low 6s, where it appeared like blue skies and better days were ahead, only to see interest rates then increase. This time last year, we were nearly at 8%. Say around October, November of last year, we nearly hit 8% before coming down. but we have routinely seen interest rates shift from 6.5 to 7.5 to 6 to 7 to 7 to 8. And these large fluctuations where you're talking about a full percentage point higher or higher of interest, that is very difficult, as many of you might have experienced, for a consumer. How am I supposed to buy a house when my payment could fluctuate by $300, $400, $500 depending on how interest rates feel that week? So to dive into my predictions for Denver's real estate and the national housing market for that matter, so my number one prediction is that, and get ready for this Nostradamus moment, while there will be no housing market crash, sorry folks, there very likely will be a correction of housing prices in certain sectors and certain areas. Now, a correction, if we're talking stocks, we're talking a price decrease of up to 10%. Housing, not necessarily that dramatic. I could see how home prices decreasing by 2 to 4%. And let's be very clear, we're not talking about high demand areas. We're not talking about concentrated areas that a lot of people still want to move to and can't afford. We're talking about areas where there's a large level of stagnation. There's not a lot of people trying to move there. There are some people that want to move and can't really do a whole lot with their house, so they need to adjust their price. And when I talk about this correction, I'm typically talking somewhere between 2 to 4%, maybe a little more. Let me give you some examples of where this could happen. A sector, for instance, condominiums, and that is nationwide. Why with condos? Well, for a few reasons. One, HOAs in a lot of areas are, can't really say out of control, but they're out of control. Whether it's the dues going up, whether it's some of the assessments they've had to place, whether it's some of the maintenance they've had to do. And there are, in fact, sometimes in which lenders can't loan on a specific condo for certain issues that they have to address. This really saps, to some extent, the selling power of condos. It saps some of the buyers that want to purchase condos, and it makes it a sector, again, that is ripe for potential price corrections. You'll also see it in certain areas, even around the Denver metro, and when we talk about sectors, we might be talking about a specific neighborhood or a specific age or range of homes. But we've seen property taxes increase over the last couple years in in the Denver metro area significantly. Again, we've seen interest rates go up, and we've seen homeowners insurance. This again is a national issue, but we've seen homeowners insurance increase. So as people go to buy these houses, their affordability is shrunk because not only, again, is it interest rate, there's other factors at play. So what does that mean? It means that there are going to be situations where a seller has to decrease their prices. Now, before somebody says, what are you talking about, idiot? Denver, for instance, is such a desired place, there's no way we would see corrections. You're already seeing it in some sectors. You are already seeing some price reductions, and you are also seeing seller concessions in which the seller is giving buyers money towards their purchase. You're already seeing about half the homes in the Denver metro give some type of reduction and concessions, a possibility there. And we don't see publicly, you don't see if they gave concessions. So if a house sells for $500,000 and the sellers gave the buyers $10,000 to lower their interest rate or cover their closing costs, you're not going to see that. So if we don't see price reductions, but we do see the vast majority of homes give these concessions, which could and is happening, that is no different than a correction of home prices. But again, don't start panicking on me. We're not talking crash. That isn't happening. And even this correction will happen in certain sectors. It's not going to happen nationwide, and it's not going to happen to a dramatic extent. Second prediction. The spring is always an aggressive period of time for home buyers. That's typically when the market gets going. Not just home buyers, but sellers. That's when people really start to want to make moves. A lot of people, they want to move like right as summer starts, right as the kids are getting out of school. I expect this to be an extremely aggressive spring. The reason I say that is we are starting to see seasonality come back to markets, at least especially here in the Denver metro. During the pandemic, when interest rates were low, seasonality went out the door. Money was cheap. So if you could buy a house, you bought a house. Really didn't seem to matter to people what time of year it is. We were closing people, heck, darn near Christmas Day. Now we've seen people return to more of that familiarity where the convenience factor of when they want to buy a house is important to them. Spring being and spring being a huge opportunity for that. Why will it be that aggressive? Because each year we have this built up aggression, if you will, towards the market. These higher interest rates have placed a lot of buyers on the sidelines. We'd love to use that term, sitting on the sidelines, and they're just waiting to play. And so as the new year comes, January, we get into February, more people are just gearing up, getting ready, and during that spring market, that's usually when you see that rush. On top of that, I would expect that interest rates that have hovered around 6.5% to 7% the last month and a half to 2 months, we could see a little relief there. Not dramatic, but a little relief there. Enough optimism to convince people that it's time to get out and buy. If and when, in my opinion, that occurs, you are going to see a very healthy and aggressive buyer amount of activity going into the market. Should certainly benefit sellers, but there should be a lot of buyers on the market. Now, I would also anticipate, much like we saw this year, that as you go into right around the Mother's Day weekend, you start to see a slowdown. It becomes more of a pick and choose. Are we ready to buy a home? Are we not? Sellers start to take their foot off the gas. If they don't have to sell, they won't. And again, barring some type of wild interest rate change lower I don't think we'll see any changes there. Third prediction, and I know it stinks, but for everybody who has been dangling the carrot, interest rates are going to come down. Interest rates, we're almost there. I see interest rates still hovering between that 6 to 7% mark, probably closer to 6.25% on average, up to 7% through the year. I expect that to go through 2025 and probably through 2026. I think a lot of this is due to the fact that the Fed has to dance around certain conversations. They have to dance around this talk of tariffs. They have to dance around the fact that inflation, while starting to trend in a good direction for months and months, and has shown some signs of weakness. We also have to keep an eye on unemployment, which has been pretty stable, and the Fed's second job on top of managing inflation is to maximize employment numbers. And then, of course, we have the national debt, which continues to grow, meaning the Treasury has to continue to print 10-year Treasury bills. Those continue to sell as of the making of this video, right around a 4.15% yield. That puts pressure on mortgage rates. So there's no clear indication or clear good news that we're going to see rates move in a good direction anytime soon. And I think we need to be clear. Let's talk about the Fed for a second, because from 2016 to 2020, February of 2020, the Fed was moving towards increasing rates. Slowly but steady, they were increasing rates. Then the pandemic happens. Then they completely blow it, drop interest rates into the dirt, blow up the housing market, as I mentioned. So this idea that they're suddenly going to drop their short-term rate, that does not immediately impact our mortgage rates, but certainly eventually impacts it. There's just no clear indication that they're going to continue to do that from an aggressive nature. And keep in mind, the dual mandate of the Fed is inflation and max employment. And those two have been pretty stubborn. Granted, we want a lot of people to have their jobs. We're never cheering for people to lose their jobs so we can get better mortgage rates. That doesn't tend to help us very much. And then inflation has been stubborn. We still have the high cost of goods. While we saw, again, some progress on that, it has stabilized to some extent. My fourth prediction, and I just can't wait for the comments on this because you're going to get all political on me, but it's just the truth. We are either going to hear tariff talk start to go away or get ready for pain, because tariff talks and tariffs are not good typically for inflation. And if tariffs are put in place, or if there is a lot of belief that significant tariffs are going to be put in place, that is going to affect inflation. But even before that, it is going to affect how the mortgage-backed security market feels. And yes, we get into our feelings with the mortgage-backed security, it will drive rates higher. If there is, again, significant talk and it seems, evidence points towards tariffs being put in place, knowing that that will lead to inflation will lead to mortgage rates going higher. So again, either my prediction is that we hear tariffs like, shh, stop talking about it for a second, or that talk continues and interest rates move higher. I know I'm all just like sunshine and rainbows today, right? But wait, I got some good news. My fifth prediction, it's actually not good news. The only way that interest rates decrease into the 5% range, which is something that people have been talking about for multiple years. I remember old Barry Habib talking about how interest rates would drop into the high fives by the end of 2022. He also predicted that they were going to drop in May of 2023, but Barry knows a lot more than I do, and he gets paid a lot more than I do. Regardless, I just want to drop his name in this video. The only way that interest rates drop into the fives in 2025 would be unfortunately because of a massive military combat situation. So essentially, something none of us want to have happen. The reality is that where inflation is, where unemployment is, where our economy is, even if we don't seem to like where our economy is, some of us, we are going to see interest rates remain in that 6 to 7% range. The reason that this is important, the reason that I want to end with this, is because knowing where those rates are allows us to prepare for it. The one thing that I hate is when, and I use the term hate, is going back to dangling that carrot. When you tell someone that eventually rates are going to get better. Now, even me telling you that I think we're going to see some price corrections in some areas doesn't mean hang tight and wait for that house correction to occur. I mean, unless it's the specific location and type of home you want to buy and there's signs of that. But what it means is we can prepare for it. If we know rates are going to stay higher and we're very certain that concessions from sellers are going to help us buy those homes, we can plan accordingly. Whereas if I tell you, hey, don't worry about it. Interest rates are going to get better. In the near future, things are just going to be wonderful. Then we don't have to plan for anything. We can just hang tight and wait for the grass to be greener without watering it or without walking on it or even perhaps looking at it. But all in all, I would say this. I know that I have shared some predictions that might not get people super psyched. But here's the thing. Higher interest rates did exactly as I mentioned earlier. It slowed down the appreciation of this market. It allowed for sellers who have owned their home for, several years or at least a handful of years to sell their house, to gain some solid equity, to gain some solid capital gains from it, and to benefit from home ownership while allowing buyers to find a home at a home price that hasn't continued to appreciate by double digits. It has created an environment where buyers have negotiating abilities to match anything sellers have had. It is not or no longer simply the bloodbath of sellers taking every last dime from buyers they can and moving on. We are in a market now where buyers can find good homes, they have time to consider the home, they have the ability to negotiate for that home, and they have the ability to win. It may not be perfect, but it's as good as it's been in a long time. Currently, this is probably the best buyer's market Denver has had, or the closest to a buyer's market Denver has had in 10 to 11 years. Consider that. And that is a perfect time to hit me up with this number, that email, knowing that I am always the person answering your calls, answer your texts, answer your emails, there winning if you need me. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. That was 5 predictions for the Denver housing market and real estate in 2025. Until I see you next time, peace.